October 10th, 2023, number 4101 is called Divvy Democratically. Even Steven, or is he a Steven with a V? Look how each kid hovers over their divvy. I made you a lunch you can't smack, Tim thinks his mom says before he walks out the door on his way to school. Then hurry up, slowpokes, or you'll be late for band practice. She knew neither of them played an instrument, threw a flag, or did any percussive ticking, at least with any official objects of percussion. Tim had banged his head so hard jumping into a bus once that he'd woken up in a hospital bed with a concussion, which he'd think from time to time, how unfair, because you see, he'd never been banged up in such a way that he'd have a permanent souvenir, or at least one that might last as long as a plaster cast that could be signed by all of the classmates who didn't speak to him, which were all of his classmates. He'd always gotten along better with his teachers. He'd hear all too often the nasally screech, teacher's pet, which at this point was not a source of pride but an excuse to turn red with embarrassment. Oh, that was his favorite. But even at his age, which was whatever age fifth graders were at the time, he had within him enough of a kernel of empathy that he felt a bit guilty or bad, or was it perhaps even a bit compassion for his younger sibs who, for whatever reasons such things occur, had such troubles within that red-bricked institution most people remember as where, during the daylight hours, their trip from post-toddler through pubescence transpired, if they remembered anything at all. So his kid brothers and his little sister had their troubles in school, never able to get the scores that mom or sometimes even dad might deign to congratulate, pridefully imagining a son or daughter who might grow up and, escape. Aren't you Tim's younger brother or sister? They'd often be asked as homework was returned with frowny faces or worse throughout the day. Or, why can't you act more like your big brother? Said before sending one of them off to the principal. So in retrospect, being teacher's pet was not that horrible, Tim supposed. Rather than return home to attend to the cows and the dogs and the cats and the horses like his younger siblings would, each claiming one or more of the beasts as their very own, their pets, Tim would flop onto his bed, dig out the book he'd nearly finished or perhaps had just begun, and read. This he'd do until dinner was called, and then back he'd go to his bed and his book after he'd eaten, reading more, until all the kids were ordered to bed. This would occur for many years at around 8 in the evening. But Tim, having a small pen light, would continue to read after that, curled under his covers well into the night. And then usually around the time he began to hear Johnny Carson in the distant living room and his dad's occasional Betty laugh, he'd doze off, jerking away momentarily shortly after just to turn off the pen light. He didn't mind being that different from the rest of the group of humans with whom he lived, those folks who were, and he'd sigh as he thought of his blood relatives. Sure, it was a bit exasperating at times, but all in all, he didn't have many complaints. He simply preferred his way of being over theirs.